Daddy, please don't let them take me." The cry of 6-year-old Lucas echoes long after he vanishes from his elite Los Angeles school. The world assumes it's a cold-blooded kidnapping for ransom, but as the truth begins to unravel, one woman uncovers a far darker reality. Lucas wasn't taken by a stranger. The betrayal came from within the mansion's walls. But why? For greed, for revenge, or for a reason too twisted to imagine? Join us to expose the traitor inside the Hale family and discover the desperate lengths they will go to keep their secrets buried. But before we delve deeper, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. 2:47 in the morning. The crimson numbers of a digital clock sliced through the kitchen's profound darkness. It cast haunting shadows across the polished marble floors of the Hale family's Beverly Hills estate, where Ariana Hale moved like a phantom, her steps silent, her path calculated. A storm of nervous energy coursed through her, a stark contrast to the mansion's heavy stillness. She had been lying awake for 3 agonizing hours, waiting for this very moment. She slipped into the backyard, the chill of the California air a cold caress against her skin. The security cameras had a blind spot in the far left corner of the garden, a fatal flaw her husband Nathan never noticed, but one she had marked long ago. Her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as she dialed a number she had committed to memory days before. A coarse voice answered instantly. "I'm here," Vince Marlowe whispered. "Is everything ready?" Ariana asked, her teeth sinking into her lower lip, a childhood habit that surfaced whenever she felt the walls closing in. "Yes. Now listen closely," she commanded in a hushed tone. $100,000 now, another $100,000 when the job is finished. The boy is released from Hawthorne Academy at 3 p.m. sharp. The maid is always there to pick him up. You will have a 15-minute window before Nathan's driver shows up. A dark, humorless chuckle echoed from the other end. "And you're positive your husband will pay up?" Ariana's eyes drifted toward the master bedroom window, where Nathan slept, completely unaware. 6 years of marriage had taught her one undeniable truth. He would pay anything, absolutely anything, for Lucas. "He will pay whatever you ask," she said, her voice laced with venom. "That boy is his only weakness. How long do you want him kept?" "No more than 48 hours, she instructed, "just long enough to terrify Nathan. Long enough to make him finally understand the pain of losing what he loves most." Vince laughed again. "Consider it done. By this time tomorrow night, your little problem will be handled." Ariana ended the call and slipped back inside the suffocating silence of the house. She hid the burner phone deep inside a flower canister in the pantry, a place the maid, Elena, would never dream of looking. Everything had to appear perfect. At 6:30 a.m., the alarm shrieked to life. Ariana feigned a gentle, natural awakening beside Nathan. He was already absorbed in his phone, scrolling through an endless stream of emails. "Good morning," she murmured, her kiss on his cheek a masterpiece of her long-running performance. He barely grunted in response. "Morning. The meeting with the Japanese investors has been moved up. So, Elena will need to take Lucas to school," he stated. "Of course, darling. I have my spa appointment with the girls from the club," Ariana replied, her voice saccharine sweet. It was a carefully constructed lie she had rehearsed for weeks. Downstairs, Elena Carter moved through the kitchen with the flawless precision of someone who had served the same breakfast for 7 years. But as she heard Ariana descending the grand staircase, she sensed a disturbance in the familiar rhythm of her footsteps. They were faster, laced with an anxious energy. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," Elena said gently. "Morning," Ariana muttered, her fingers drumming a frantic silent scream on the breakfast bar. A moment later, her phone buzzed with an incoming notification. The way she lunged for it was telling. And Elena, after 7 years of silent observation within the Hale mansion, had learned to notice everything. Through years of quiet observation, she'd honed an almost psychic sense for unspoken feelings, especially Ariana's. Just then, Nathan strode into the dining room, meticulously adjusting his gold cufflinks. Lucas trailed behind him, his private school tie askew, his shoes undone. "Dad? Could you help me with my math homework tonight?" Lucas's voice was filled with a fragile hope. "We'll see," Nathan murmured, not even glancing up, already lost behind the morning paper. A familiar ache tightened in Elena's chest. She knelt before Lucas, her fingers moving with practiced care to tie his laces. "Don't you worry, my dear boy," she whispered. "You'll figure it out. You're clever, you always do." Across the table, Ariana was anxiously glancing at her phone every few seconds. "Is everything all right?" Nathan finally asked. "Perfectly fine," she lied, her voice a little too bright. "Just confirming spa appointments." But Elena saw the lie for what it was, a flimsy, transparent veil. "Elena," Nathan said, rising from his chair, "don't forget Lucas's dentist appointment next week." "I have it noted, sir," she answered, her voice soft. The moment breakfast ended, Ariana cornered her. "You're taking Lucas to school today. Isn't that right?" "As I always do." "Good. And be sure to pick him up at precisely 3 p.m., not 1 minute late." A deep frown creased Elena's brow. Ariana had never once shown the slightest concern for pickup times before. "I am always early," she replied. By noon, Elena was buckling Lucas into the modest silver Honda Civic, a car Nathan had purchased for her duties, a stark contrast to the family's gleaming Mercedes, but dependable. "Elena?" Lucas's small voice broke the silence. Why is Ariana always so angry with me? The question felt like a stone in her throat. For 6 long years, she had been a silent witness to Ariana's chilling indifference toward the boy. "Oh, honey, she's not angry with you," Elena soothed. "Grown-ups just have complicated worries." "She doesn't hug me anymore," Lucas whispered, his eyes downcast. "Not like she used to hug Dad, right after they were married." Elena drew a slow, steadying breath. "Your father loves you more than anything in this world. That's what truly matters. And you have me. Don't you?" Elena offered a gentle smile. "Of course I do." As they pulled up to Hawthorne Academy, a man leaning against a stark white van across the street caught her eye. He wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, but his gaze was fixed on the school with an unsettling intensity. Every instinct inside her began to scream. The moment he saw her watching, he abruptly turned, got in his van, and sped away. A knot of ice formed in Elena's stomach. At 3:10 that afternoon, she returned, but Lucas was nowhere to be seen. Other children were rushing into their parents' waiting arms. Teachers were waving their goodbyes, but Lucas, he was simply gone. Panic seized her as she ran to his teacher, Miss Hartley. "Where is Lucas Hale?" The teacher offered a pleasant, unconcerned smile. "Oh, his uncle came for him about 20 minutes ago." "His uncle?" Elena's blood ran cold. "Mr. Hale doesn't have any brothers." Miss Hartley's face went white. "But he said he was family. He even had identification." But Elena was no longer listening, her fingers frantically dialing Nathan's number. "Elena, what is it?" "He's gone. Lucas is gone. A man took him." An endless, horrifying silence stretched across the line. "Someone has taken my son," Nathan whispered, his voice cracking. Elena's next call was to Ariana. The first call went to voicemail, the second, the same. On the third, she finally picked up. "What is it?" Ariana's voice was unnervingly calm. "Lucas has been taken," Elena sobbed into the phone. There was a pause, a beat too long. "What do you mean?" "Someone took him." Ariana's words were slow, measured. A chill crept down Elena's spine. This wasn't shock. This was a performance. "I'll be home right away," Ariana said. "You should probably call Nathan." When they all gathered back at the mansion, Nathan was a wreck, pacing frantically. Ariana, however, was a storm of dramatic, theatrical tears, and Elena watched her, her gaze sharp and unforgiving. Not once did Ariana ask if Lucas was frightened, if he was hurt. And then, the house phone rang, shattering the tense air. Nathan snatched it, putting it on speaker. Nathan Hale. A cold, digitally altered voice replied, "I have something that belongs to you." Elena felt the world stop. Their nightmare had just begun. Nathan's knuckles turned white as he gripped the receiver, his world crumbling. His knuckles bleached white against the phone as a warped electronic voice filled the living room with dread. Elena was paralyzed by the staircase, a silent statue of fear, while Ariana clung to Nathan's arm, her sobs feeling utterly staged. "Who is this?" Nathan's voice cracked, his breath catching in his throat. "Where is my son?" A cold, measured response came back. "Lucas is alive." The voice continued, each word a drop of ice. For now, Elena's heart plummeted into a cold abyss. "If you ever want to see him again, you will bring us $2 million in cash." Nathan's breath hitched in a strangled gasp. "2 million? Fine. It's yours. I'll get it, whatever it takes. Just tell me he's okay. Let me speak to him, please." But the only reply was the dead silence of a disconnected line. Nathan stumbled backward, collapsing onto the sofa as if the very breath had been stolen from his body. Instantly, Ariana was at his side, throwing herself against him and burying her face in his chest in a show of dramatic despair. "Oh, my baby, Nathan, what are we going to do?" she wailed. Yet, through the performance, Elena caught a flicker of her eyes, a quick, furtive glance down at her phone, as if she were checking for a message. Nathan, oblivious, raked a trembling hand through his hair. I have to call Gallagher. He'll know how to get the assets liquidated and fast." He scrambled toward his office, the phone already glued to his ear, leaving Elena alone in the sudden heavy silence with Ariana. And in that moment, Elena witnessed it. The instant Ariana's manufactured tears vanished, replaced by an unnerving, cold stillness. It was a calculating calm. She wiped her eyes not with grief, but with the finality of flipping a switch before her gaze returned to her phone. A knot of ice formed in Elena's stomach. This was wrong. This was all terribly, horribly wrong. Sleep was impossible that night. The great mansion was eerily silent, but the weight of the day's events crushed down on her chest like a slab of concrete. Every single detail replayed in her mind on a torturous loop. The stark white van, the strange man watching the school, Ariana's hollow panic, her constant obsessive phone checking. And the most damning piece of all, the teacher's words echoed in her memory. Lucas had no uncle, no extended family on either Nathan's or Ariana's side. Someone had deliberately fed the kidnappers that lie. At 2:30 in the morning, the sound of footsteps upstairs broke the silence, and a new wave of unease washed over Elena. Driven by a gut feeling, she slipped from her room, drawn to a soft sliver of light from beneath Nathan's office door. As she crept closer, she heard a name. Gallagher. "Listen to me." Nathan's voice was raw, frayed with exhaustion. "I need everything turned to cash by morning. Stocks, bonds, I don't care what it takes." Elena flattened herself against the cool wall, listening intently. "No, I can't explain it. Just know that it's a family emergency of the highest order." "I understand. The penalties, damn it!" A painful pause. "If this were your child," Nathan pleaded in a broken whisper, "wouldn't you do exactly the same?" Elena felt the tremor in his voice resonate deep within her own chest. For the first time in 7 long years, the man who treated her like part of the furniture suddenly sounded devastatingly human. He sounded broken, terrified. Moved by an impulse she didn't fully understand, Elena retreated to the kitchen and quietly brewed a fresh pot of coffee. She carried a steaming cup to his office and knocked softly on the door. "Come in." Nathan looked up, his eyes bloodshot and hollow with exhaustion. "I thought you might need this." Elena offered gently. He nodded, a flicker of genuine gratitude in his eyes that caught her completely off guard. "Thank you, Elena. Truly." She lingered for a moment, unsure of what to do. "Sir, is there anything else I can do?" He hesitated, his gaze searching hers. Elena, in all the years you've worked for us, have you ever noticed anything strange? Anything at all about this house? About our family?" The question blindsided her. I'm not sure what you mean, sir." Nathan rubbed his temples wearily. "Never mind. It's just the stress. It's making me see shadows everywhere." She turned to go, but something made her pause at the door. "Mr. Hale?" she said, her voice soft but certain. "Lucas is such a strong boy. We are going to find him. I know we will." And, for the very first time, Nathan looked at her not as an employee, but as a person. "Thank you, Elena. You genuinely care about him, don't you?" She simply nodded, her heart aching. "More than you could ever know." As Wednesday morning dawned, marking the second day of the nightmare, Nathan left before sunrise, beginning the desperate race to gather $2 million. Ariana lingered in her chambers well past morning, acclaimed migraine her shield, but Elena sensed a different, more anxious vigil, awaiting for a message that had nothing to do with pain. When she finally descended, Ariana was a vision of unnerving perfection, a stark contrast to the image of a heartbroken stepmother. Her voice, a silken whisper, called out, "Elena." "I need you to go to Lucas's room," she instructed, her tone eerily calm. "Remake the bed with fresh linens. Put everything in its place. I want it flawless for his return." Elena was taken aback. In 6 long years, Ariana had shown zero interest in the state of the boy's room. "But, ma'am," she stammered, "the room is already clean." "I want it immaculate." Ariana's voice cracked like a whip. "Just do it." A knot of confusion tightened in Elena's stomach as she ascended the staircase. Pushing open the door to Lucas's room, she was met with a scene she had just put in order the day before. A poignant tableau of a little boy's life, his pencils scattered from last night's homework, his small toy car standing in a neat row on the shelf, the sheets on his bed still rumpled from his hurried morning departure. Everything was a portrait of innocence, a heartbreakingly normal scene. Sinking onto the edge of the mattress, Elena's gaze was drawn to a silver-framed Christmas photograph on his small desk. In the picture, Nathan clutched Lucas in a warm, beaming embrace. Ariana stood at his side, her lips curved into a perfect smile, but as Elena looked closer, a detail she'd always missed leapt out at her. Ariana's hands were at her sides. She wasn't touching Lucas at all. Not a comforting hand on his shoulder, not a single point of contact. There was a chasm of empty space between them. A palpable coldness emanated from the image. A shiver traced its way down Elena's spine, and with it came a dreadful, unthinkable suspicion. Driven by this terrifying new thought, she did what she never imagined she would. She entered Ariana's private sanctuary and began to search. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she rifled through drawers and closets and checked the nightstands, finding everything meticulously ordered, as if staged for a magazine. But in the bathroom, tucked inside the waste bin, her search came to a horrifying end. Beneath discarded tissues and makeup wipes lay a single, crumpled piece of paper. With trembling hands, Elena smoothed it out. The words stared back at her. $100,000 up front. $100,000 after. Phone 5550847. R Industrial Avenue, 142. The air left her lungs. The elegant script was unmistakably Ariana's. The amounts, the details, they mirrored the kidnapper's demands. Her mind racing, Elena snapped a picture of the note with her old phone, carefully placing it back in the trash, just as it was. The knowledge felt explosive, like holding a primed grenade in her hands. At 2 in the afternoon, Ariana declared she needed some fresh air on the patio. Seizing the chance, Elena moved like a shadow, creeping through the garden until she was concealed by the bushes just below the living room window. Ariana's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the air. "You can't change the price now, Vince. We had an agreement." The name sent a shard of ice through Elena's veins. She knew his name. She was in on it. Elena's fingers fumbled for her phone, hitting the record button just as Ariana spoke again. "What do you mean? He's being difficult." Ariana's voice was a venomous hiss. "He's 6 years old. What trouble could he possibly— A sharp crack echoed as Elena's foot landed on a dry twig. The voice on the phone went dead. "Who's there?" Ariana shouted the words. Elena threw herself behind the potting shed. Her breath caught in her throat as Ariana emerged onto the patio, her eyes sweeping the yard with the intensity of a predator. An eternity seemed to pass before she retreated back inside. Elena remained frozen in place for 10 more agonizing minutes. There was no more doubt. Ariana had orchestrated the entire nightmare, and far worse, Lucas was in real, imminent danger. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Nathan arrived, his face a mask of gray exhaustion, carrying a duffel bag heavy with $2 million in cash. Ariana rushed into his arms, her body racked with false sobs. "Thank God," she cried. "Now, all we can do is wait for their call." From the kitchen doorway, Elena watched the sickening performance unfold. She watched, and she waited. At 5 in the evening, the phone rang once more. "Nathan Hale," a distorted, gravelly voice snarled. "We've got a problem." All color vanished from Nathan's face. What kind of problem? The voice on the other end was cold. "The kid was a handful, cried all night, even tried to run. My associates are not pleased. So the price has been adjusted." Elena's eyes darted to Ariana, who for the first time looked genuinely stunned. "How much?" Nathan whispered, his voice barely audible. $3 million. I can't." Nathan choked out, his voice fracturing with despair. "I've liquidated everything I own." The voice on the line was devoid of any pity. "That sounds like your problem, not mine." The voice on the other end was like cracking ice. "You have until noon tomorrow." Then, silence. The line went dead, and with it, Nathan's strength. He simply crumpled onto the couch. Ariana rushed to console him, her words a hollow comfort, for Elena could see the raw terror flickering behind her eyes. The carefully laid plan was unraveling, slipping through her manicured fingers. And in that moment, a chilling certainty washed over Elena. If she didn't intervene, Lucas was not coming home alive. She held her breath, waiting for the moment Nathan finally retreated into the solitude of his office. She saw him clutching his head, a man besieged by his own powerlessness. Through the door, she could hear the frantic, desperate calls to banks, to private lenders, anyone who would listen. He even reached out to old business partners, his voice fracturing every time he uttered Lucas's name. And through it all, Ariana clung to him, a constant, watchful shadow. She was always hovering, interrupting, physically placing herself between Elena and Nathan the instant Elena tried to approach him. The truth was now stark and undeniable. Ariana knew that Elena knew, and that knowledge had transformed Elena into a threat. She had to tread so carefully. The hours dragged on, thick with unspoken dread. Elena went through the motions of making dinner, a meal no one would touch. Nathan paced the floors like a caged animal while Ariana produced perfectly timed waves of tears. And Elena, she just watched it all unfold. She was waiting, praying for a single moment alone with him. At 10 o'clock at night, her chance finally came. She found Nathan in the hallway. "Mr. Hale, sir, there's something you must know. It's about Ariana." But the name was barely out of her mouth before Ariana materialized, as if summoned from the shadows, listening just around the corner. "Elena," her voice cut through the air like a whip. "Could you prepare the guest room? My sister is flying in tonight, for support." "But, sir, I have to—" Elena pleaded, but Ariana cut her off, her voice dropping to an order as she closed the distance between them. "Now, Elena." Behind the carefully constructed mask of grief, her eyes were like shards of glass. Nathan, broken, barely glanced up. "Elena, please, just— not now." And with that, the door clicked shut, sealing him away from her. Elena stood there, frozen, the blood turning to ice in her veins. Ariana had just slammed the door on her only chance. She moved like an automaton, preparing the guest room on pure instinct. Her mind, however, was a whirlwind. Ariana had always been cold, selfish, even careless. But she was far from stupid. If she even suspected what Elena knew, she would become utterly and terrifyingly dangerous. At 10:30 that night, Elena spotted Ariana on the phone, her voice a low murmur, a hand pressed to her temple in a poor imitation of a headache. Holding her breath, Elena crept down the hallway, her ear pressed to the sliver of space by the half-closed door. "Yes, Rye. I know it's complicated," Ariana whispered, her voice laced with a genuine terror that Elena had never heard before. Finally, the fear was real. "No, I can't get another million. Nathan's already suspicious." A pause. Then, a horrified hiss. "Are you out of your mind? End him? That was never part of the plan. No, absolutely not." Elena clamped both hands over her mouth, stifling a gasp that threatened to betray her. If Ray was talking about Lucas, this had spiraled far beyond a simple ransom. This was life or death. She had no choice left. She had to get to Nathan, now. As she pulled back to search for him, the door swung open and Ariana emerged, her eyes locking onto Elena with a sharp, predatory glare. "What are you doing here?" The question was an accusation. Elena flinched. I was just going to the kitchen, ma'am." But Ariana moved in, invading her space. Too close. "You've seemed on edge lately, Elena, haven't you?" She purred, her tone low and laced with poison. I don't know what you mean." "Oh, I think you do." Elena's hands trembled, her knuckles white as she gripped the tray she was holding. Just then, a vibration from her pocket, her phone. It had to be Ray, calling back, but she was frozen, afraid to even breathe. Ariana leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. "We need to have a little chat soon, Elena. A very serious one." Elena could only manage a quick, terrified nod. "Yes, ma'am, of course." It wasn't until Ariana's footsteps faded down the hall that Elena finally dared to draw a breath. Thursday morning came, but Elena had been awake long before the sun, a fiery resolve hardening in her heart. If she couldn't reach Nathan inside this house, then she would find a way to warn him outside of it. She shed her uniform, pulling on her own clothes, a silent declaration of her intent. She told Ariana she was heading out for early groceries. Ariana barely glanced up from her phone, but the rigid set of her shoulders was all the confirmation Elena needed. She was being watched. Slipping out from the mansion's shadow, Elena bypassed the familiar path to the market entirely. Her determined steps led her straight to the home of Mrs. Whitaker, the elderly neighbor whose gaze missed nothing on their street. "Oh, Elena, my dear, do come in," Mrs. Whitaker cooed, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold fear gripping Elena as she sipped the offered tea. She fought to still her trembling hands. "Mrs. Whitaker, have you seen anything out of the ordinary around here lately?" A spark ignited in the old woman's eyes, the thrill of neighborhood news undeniable. "Well, now that you mention it," she mused, "just last week. I saw this white van, you see, parked down the lane for 3 consecutive days. The same man was always inside, a dark mustache, a baseball cap pulled low. He was just watching the houses." An icy dread washed over Elena. "That's the man who took Lucas," she whispered, the words catching in her throat as Mrs. Whitaker gasped. Elena shot to her feet, her mind a whirlwind. "Thank you. I have to go." Every second was precious now. By 11 a.m., and she was back within the mansion's cold walls. She wore a mask of calm, but it shattered when she saw Ariana waiting in the living room, arms folded across her chest. "You paid our neighbor a visit this morning." Ariana's voice was deceptively gentle, and Elena's blood ran cold. A cruel smile touched Ariana's lips. "The cameras have a perfect view of the street, Elena." "You seem to forget that I see every angle of this property." Elena swallowed hard. "Mrs. Whitaker, she needed my help with something." "Did she now?" Ariana purred. She closed the distance between them. "Or were you spinning tales you had no business telling?" Elena held her breath, refusing to show her terror. "Of course not." "Ma'am." Ariana's eyes bored into her for a long, suffocating moment before she commanded, "Follow me," leading the way to the pantry. "I want this entire space reorganized," Ariana announced with a chillingly casual air. "Check every expiration date. Dispose of anything that's old." "Yes, ma'am," Elena replied, sinking to her knees beside the boxes. The moment her fingers touched the first crate, the heavy door slammed shut behind her. Click. The final, damning sound of a lock turning. Elena scrambled to her feet. "Mrs. Hale! Ariana!" The door wouldn't budge. Only a dead silence answered her. "Ma'am! Ariana!" Nothing. She began to pound on the wood, her voice cracking. "Let me out!" Still, only silence. A sob caught in her throat as pure terror flooded her chest. Ariana had entombed her. Her frantic eyes darted around the dark space, no windows, only the locked door sealing her fate. Panic threatened to consume her, but she fought it back, forcing her mind to work. Wait, the pantry. It connected to the garden tool room. A tiny, high window existed there, a sliver of hope just large enough. She began shoving crates, desperately building a makeshift ladder to freedom. Sweat stung her eyes as she heaved a heavy bin into place, using it as leverage to pry open the connecting door. It revealed a crawl space, barely wide enough. She squeezed her body through, the rough wood scraping her shoulder, until she tumbled into the tool room, and then she saw it. The small window, her only chance. She frantically stacked buckets, scrambled on top, and, with all her might, shoved the window open. With a final heave, she pulled herself through, collapsing onto the cool grass behind the house. Elena crouched, gasping for air as the truth hit her. Ariana wanted her eliminated. She knew far too much. Fueled by adrenaline, Elena sprinted toward the nearest public payphone, 2 long blocks away. She fumbled for the slip of paper in her pocket, her trembling fingers barely able to dial Vince's number. The phone rang twice. "Yeah?" The gruff, unfiltered voice belonged to him. Elena's heart stopped dead in her chest. She slammed the receiver down. It was him. Ariana had a direct line to Lucas's kidnapper. A new wave of terror propelled her back toward the mansion. As she burst through the door, Ariana was standing in the foyer, a look of feigned surprise on her face. "How did you find the pantry?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It was fine, ma'am." For a fleeting second, Ariana's eyes narrowed in confusion. She was baffled that Elena wasn't still trapped inside, but Elena gave her no time to process it. She walked straight to the kitchen phone and began dialing Nathan's number. "Mr. Hale, please, you must listen to me. I've uncovered something about your wife." But a sharp click was the only answer as the line went dead. Mere seconds later, the house phone shrieked to life. Elena answered. "Elena!" Nathan's voice cut through the line, cold and sharp. "Ariana tells me you've been having episodes. Stress, confusion. Perhaps you should take a few days off." The words struck her, and her knees felt weak. Ariana had turned him against her, poisoning his mind with lies. "No, sir, please," she begged. "She's lying. Ariana is part of this." Click. The line was dead again. Elena stared at the silent receiver in disbelief. The heartbreak was a physical ache. Behind her, Ariana stood, a small, victorious smile gracing her lips. By 8 o'clock that evening, Nathan came home, a man utterly defeated. He refused to meet Elena's eyes, the trust between them shattered by Ariana's vicious manipulation. "Elena," he said, his voice a hollow whisper, "I think it's best if you take an indefinite leave." In that moment, Elena felt her entire world shatter. Ariana stepped forward, handing her a manila envelope with a check inside. "Here's your severance. Pack your things." But Elena knew, with a cold dread, this was never about her employment. This was about silencing her. She gathered her few possessions, tears streaming silently down her face, not for the job she had lost, but for Lucas, whose precious time was rapidly running out. As she walked out to the front door, Ariana watched her with a cold, triumphant satisfaction. But as Elena stepped into the dark street with her suitcase, she made a silent, unbreakable promise. "Lucas Hale, will not die. Not while I still have breath in my body. Back in her small apartment, the air felt colder and emptier than ever before. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the envelope from Ariana. $5,000. It felt like blood money, hush money. It was the final, stinging insult after 7 years of faithful service. Her phone buzzed, a lifeline in the dark. It was her sister, Grace. "Elena, are you okay? It's almost midnight." Elena fought to find her voice. "Grace, I need your help." And then it all came pouring out. Lucas's kidnapping, Ariana's cruel lies, the mysterious number for a man named Vince, the threats, the terror of being locked in the pantry, every secret she had been forced to bear alone. A long, heavy silence stretched across the line. "Elena, you're in danger," Grace finally said. "I know," Elena whispered, "but Lucas is in so much more." Grace let out a shaky breath. "How much do you need?" $10,000, Elena said softly, "for a private investigator." "That's all of my savings." "I know." Grace hesitated for just a beat. "I'll send it tomorrow morning." But Elena didn't have a tomorrow. Lucas didn't have a tomorrow. "Thank you," Elena whispered, ending the call. As she lay staring at the cracks in her ceiling, a heavy truth settled in her soul. She could not wait for a detective. Lucas might not live to see the morning. 30 minutes later, Elena was back in her car. She was parked in the deep shadow of a jacaranda tree across the street from the Hale mansion, her eyes fixed on the windows. She saw Nathan pacing like a caged animal, while Ariana moved through the living room with a chilling calm, a woman playing her part in a tragedy she herself had written. At 10 minutes past 11, Elena saw her chance. Ariana slipped out the back door, moving toward a small white Suru parked down the block. Bingo. Elena counted 10 agonizing seconds, then quietly started her old Chevy and began to follow from a safe distance. Ariana drove with an unnerving confidence weaving through the veins of late-night Los Angeles, heading for the industrial wasteland near Vernon. It was a place of warehouses, abandoned factories, and miles of empty loading docks, the perfect forgotten corner of the world to hide a stolen child. Finally, Ariana turned into a desolate lot, stopping beside a boarded-up beverage distribution warehouse. A sliver of dim light escaped from within. Elena parked 2 streets away and approached on foot, her heart pounding with every silent step. She found a broken window, covered over with newspaper. Carefully, her fingers trembling, she peeled back an edge and peered inside. Her heart seized in her chest. It was Lucas, tied to a plastic chair in the center of the vast, dark warehouse. He was blindfolded, trembling in his school uniform, looking so heartbreakingly small. Ariana stood before Vince Marlowe, the kidnapper with a cruel mustache and chilling eyes, as Elena secretly began to record. "This is spiraling out of control, Vince," Ariana hissed. "It was never in control," Vince snapped back. "The boy cried all night long. He tried to run. My men are done playing babysitter." "Just stick to the plan," she pleaded. $2 million, and we let him go. The price is $6 million now." "What?" Ariana's voice was a frantic whisper. "Vince, we had an agreement." "That was before your husband started calling every bank and lender, putting a spotlight on us. I need more money to vanish." "I can't get $6 million. Nathan has nothing left." Vince closed the distance between them, a cruel smirk on his face. "That sounds like a problem for you, Ariana." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept the camera steady as Ariana hugged herself, her voice shaking. "After the money," she asked, "what becomes of him?" Vince let out a low, chilling laugh. "What do you think happens?" Elena clamped a hand over her mouth, a scream trapped in her throat. "No," Ariana whispered, horrified. "We were never going to harm him. This was just to scare my husband." "And I want to stay alive," Vince countered with a shrug. "The kid has seen our faces. He's a loose end." The blood drained from Ariana's face. "Vince, you can't end his life." "Watch me," he said. A surge of pure adrenaline, hot as fire, coursed through Elena. In that horrifying moment, she knew with a chilling certainty, if she didn't act tonight, Lucas would not see the morning. She scrambled back to her car, her body racked with violent tremors. She had to reach Nathan, had to get to him before Ariana could spin another web of deceit. She floored it, racing recklessly toward Beverly Hills. At 12:30 in the morning, she screeched to a halt outside the Hale mansion and hurriedly parked, dialing Nathan's number at once. Voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. A third time, it went straight to his inbox. "No! No! No!" she cried, abandoning the phone and pounding on the doorbell. At last, the heavy door creaked open. A disheveled, exhausted Nathan stood before her, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Elena," he said, his voice laced with ice. "I told you I had proof," Elena burst out, her words tumbling over each other. "I have video proof. Lucas is alive, and Ariana was with his captors tonight. I saw everything." Nathan froze, the color draining from his face. "Let me inside," Elena begged. This time he stepped aside and she played the damning video. On the screen, Lucas was bound, and Ariana was arguing while Vince threatened to silence the boy forever. Nathan's entire composure shattered. That's her," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "And that's Vince." Oh, God! He collapsed into a nearby chair, his body trembling uncontrollably. "Elena, what have I done?" he whispered, the weight of his mistake crushing him. "I sent you away. I believed her." "Sir, we don't have time for this," Elena urged. "They've already moved Lucas once. They will not hesitate to silence him tonight." Nathan shot to his feet, his despair replaced by a sharp focus. "Where was this?" "An old, abandoned warehouse just off Industrial Avenue." Nathan's eyes widened with sudden recognition. "My company. We built a complex near there. I know that entire area like the back of my hand." He snatched his keys from the table. "Let's go." As Elena followed him into the night, he declared, "We are getting my son back." His voice shook, but it was filled with a father's unwavering resolve. "Tonight." Elena nodded, her own determination matching his. "Yes, sir, tonight." They sped off into the oppressive darkness. It was a race against the clock, because Lucas only had hours left. Nathan drove like a man possessed by a single, desperate purpose. He tore through the desolate, late-night streets of Los Angeles while Elena sat beside him, her hands trembling as the horrific images from the warehouse played on a loop in her mind. Lucas, tied up, blindfolded, crying all alone. She forced herself to breathe. He needed them to be strong, to be focused. "We're close," Nathan muttered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Industrial Avenue is just ahead." Elena's gaze swept the horizon, and she pointed toward a dark cluster of decaying factories. Ariana took a side road just before the main warehouse, she recalled. "Look for a turnoff somewhere near the river." Nathan nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness for the path to his son. This part of town was a ghost from his past. He knew every crumbling facade, his own company having once breathed life into these very buildings. The streetlights flickered, surrendering to the encroaching darkness as walls, scarred with graffiti, seemed to lean in and watch them. A lone dog's bark echoed, a mournful cry in the urban wasteland, and then Elena's breath caught, the ghost of a faded billboard, a landmark from her worst nightmare. "There," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Turn right." Nathan guided the car to a stop a block away, cloaking them in the surrounding shadows. The cold night air bit at their skin the moment they stepped out, and a cocktail of decay, oil, rust, and the damp scent of the river filled their lungs with every ragged breath. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. Wordlessly, Nathan opened the trunk, his hands finding the cold, heavy steel of a crowbar and the reassuring weight of a flashlight. "Stay behind me," he murmured, a low command. They became ghosts, melting into the oppressive silence of the industrial graveyard. Their goal, the looming warehouse with its single, shattered eye of a window. Elena's hand trembled as she pointed. "He's in there, inside that room. That's where they have Lucas. A muscle tightened in Nathan's jaw as he crept to a service door tucked into the side of the building. Lena held her breath, a silent prayer on her lips as he tested the handle. It was locked solid. He forced the tip of the crowbar into the seam, throwing his entire weight against it. Metal shrieked in protest, and screws tore from their moorings with a sickening snap. The door burst inward with a deafening crack. They froze, their blood turning to ice as voices echoed from within. In a panic, Elena's fingers dug into Nathan's sleeve. Then, a voice that haunted their nightmares, Vince Marlowe's chilling drawl, cut through the cavernous space. "We finish this tonight. No more delays." The color drained from Nathan's face. "We have to go now," Elena breathed, her words barely audible as they slipped inside, pressing themselves against the cold, unfeeling walls. Before them, the warehouse unfolded into a vast cathedral of shadows, with massive, empty rows disappearing into darkness. A single, weak light flickered in the distance, a lonely star in their private hell. Then they heard it, a sound that shattered them both. Lucas's whimpering. Tears instantly welled in Elena's eyes. Nathan surged forward on pure instinct, but Elena's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "Wait," she mouthed, her eyes wide with terror. "We don't know how many there are." As they crept forward, inch by painful inch, the voices sharpened into clarity. A second man was speaking. "Rye, where the hell is the woman? She was supposed to bring the rest of the cash." The sound of Rye spitting on the concrete floor was his only reply for a moment. "Ariana's a dead end," Rye snarled. "We take what we have, get rid of the kid, and vanish." A tremor of pure, unadulterated rage coursed through Nathan's entire body. Elena's eyes met his, her lips forming the words without a sound. "We have to separate them." Her gaze darted around frantically, landing on a stack of metal rods leaning precariously against a far wall. The noise? It would be the perfect distraction, a chance to pull Vince's men away from Lucas. She gave Nathan a sharp, determined nod. This was their only shot. Elena moved toward the rods, each footfall a silent prayer on the dusty floor. Reaching them, she squeezed her eyes shut, her lips forming a single, desperate word, "Please." And then she shoved. The resulting crash was cataclysmic. Metal screamed against concrete, the sound thundering through the warehouse, an explosion in the silence. "What in the hell was that?" one of the goons yelled. "Go, check it out!" Vince barked, his voice sharp with irritation. Heavy footsteps pounded away from them, toward the sound. Nathan didn't waste a fraction of a second. He launched himself forward, sprinting toward the small, trembling figure tied to a chair, a dirty blindfold covering his eyes. "Lucas," Nathan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The boy flinched. "Dad, it's me, buddy. I'm here." With shaking hands, Nathan used the edge of the crowbar to tear through the ropes. His whole body trembled as he finally placed his hands on his son's shoulders. Elena was right beside them, her touch impossibly gentle as she lifted the blindfold from Lucas's face. The boy blinked, his eyes struggling against the faint light. "Elena," he breathed, his small voice broken. She gathered him into her arms, holding him as if she'd never let go. "I've got you, sweetheart," she murmured into his hair. "We're taking you home." But their reunion was shattered. "Hey!" Vince's roar ripped through the air as Nathan spun around. He instinctively shielded Lucas with his own body. Vince stood there, a gun gleaming in his hand. Elena froze, her heart stopping in her chest. "Did you really think," Rye growled, "you could just walk in here and take him? I'm the one in charge now." Nathan took a cautious step forward. "Vince, just listen to me." "No!" Rye screamed, the sound echoing his madness. "I told you, 6 million. That woman tried to play me. You tried to play me. Now, everyone pays the price." As the threat hung in the air, Elena pulled Lucas tighter against her, shielding him with her body, whispering to him. "Don't you look at him!" Rye's voice cut through the air as he aimed at Nathan, but then another voice echoed from the shadows. "Drop it, Ray." It was Ariana Hale, framed in the doorway, breathless and terrified, yet her hands clutched a gun of their own. A cruel laugh escaped Ray's lips. "You think you have the heart to shoot me, princess?" he sneered. "No," she answered softly, "but I have what it takes to get what I truly want." Ray's eyes glinted with amusement. "And what would that be?" In a horrifying turn, Ariana pivoted, her gun now aimed directly at Lucas. A gasp tore from Elena's lungs as Nathan cried out in anguish, but Ariana's eyes were a storm of broken desperation. "If he survives this, Nathan will never forgive me," she whispered to the air around her. "He'll learn the truth. Everything will fall apart. But if he dies tonight, the blame is all Ray's, and I simply walk away." Ray blinked, genuinely stunned. "You're even more unhinged than I am." In that moment, Elena felt Lucas trembling violently within her embrace. She held him tighter, a silent vow of protection, as Nathan stepped between Ariana's weapon and his own son. "Ariana, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. You loved him," he pleaded. "I never loved him," she spat back, her words laced with venom. "He was always your burden, your mistake, not mine." The words struck Nathan with more force than any bullet ever could. Sensing his advantage in the chaos, Ray raised his gun again, ready to end it all. In that heart-stopping split second, Elena moved. She lunged, snatching a shard of jagged metal from the floor and hurling it with every ounce of strength she possessed. It struck Ray squarely on the wrist. He screamed in pain, his weapon clattering to the ground as Nathan charged, tackling him instantly. The two men crashed onto the concrete in a desperate, violent struggle. Ariana shrieked, firing her gun wildly as the bullet ricocheted off a steel beam with a deafening whine. Elena shielded Lucas with her own body as, with a final surge of adrenaline, Nathan slammed Ray's head against a pillar, knocking him unconscious. Wasting no time, Elena grabbed Ray's fallen gun and pointed it directly at Ariana. "Drop it!" she commanded, her voice shaking, but firm as stone. Ariana's frantic eyes darted from Nathan embracing his son, to Elena holding the gun, to Ray's motionless form on the floor. The fight finally drained from her as she lowered her weapon. It landed with a hollow clatter, and for the first time, Ariana collapsed, sobbing not from guilt, but from the crushing weight of her own defeat. Minutes later, the wail of approaching sirens filled the night, painting the desolate warehouse in pulsing waves of red and blue. Ray and his men were swiftly arrested. Ariana screamed curses as officers cuffed her, threatening a bitter revenge on them all, while Nathan just held Lucas, clinging to him for dear life. Tears of pure relief streamed down his face. "You saved my son," he whispered to Elena, his voice utterly broken with emotion. "I will never forget what you did." Elena managed a weak smile, gently brushing the hair from Lucas's forehead. "I promised him he'd be okay," she whispered, "and I don't break my promises." For the first time in 2 agonizing days, the nightmare was finally over.